He can't be mind controlled. He survived 3,000 years at the bottom of the ocean. And according to Batman himself, he is one of the most dangerous beings on the earth. He's not even originally a DC character either. But out of everything and everyone that they've acquired over the years, Plastic Man might be their most interesting, horrifying hero to date. Not just because of what he can do, but because of what he chooses not to do. And the horrifying question of what happens if he ever stops choosing to be a hero, that's what makes him so haunting. Today we're going deep into the elastic cells of Patrick Eel O'Brien, the Plastic Man. The most horrifying yet lovable hero you've never realized you should be afraid of. Before Plas became a body horror legend in the comics, we have to understand just how groundbreaking Plastic Man was before he even got to the JLA. Golden Age comics don't always hit, and that's for a variety of reasons. But I think what makes Plastic Man's origin, his original debut as a failed thief and this transformation into an elastic hero, what makes that really compelling is largely due to the combination of the original art and just innovative lettering, and how they structured the pages back then was just underrated, to say the least. The early issues of Plastic Man are just great. They're so great and so clean at times that it's shocking to see how you can write this elastic comic relief bit character as wholesome fun, but then you can also take him and make him the most horrifying hero, and it doesn't require anything more than just thinking a little bit more about what he's actually able to do with his powers and how he could be the most dangerous villain if he wanted to be. He's this guy who doesn't go through some home planet exploding. He doesn't have this whole burden of being the last of his kind like Superman. He doesn't even have an Uncle Ben moment like Spider-Man. He's an old school thief, gangster type from back in the day that gets caught doing a job. He's notoriously wanted across several states and stuff, but he gets caught. His crew bails on him. He gets shot in the middle of all of it, and some acid from the warehouse that they were trying to rip off gets in his wounds as he's escaping. But in his original origin, he's taken in by this monk during his escape from the police, and he's given this small act of compassion and kindness from a complete stranger, and that's enough for him. That's all he needed. He had no hope in humanity after years and years of living the way he was living, turned to a life of crime, and he was pushed around for most of his life. But until this moment, he wakes up with skin like a rubber band and all these weird powers. His skeleton's completely flexible, and his immediate thought is, what an amazing tool this could be for living a life against crime now. He can see a purpose finally. He can see a purpose for doing something greater. How much fun would it be to be a hero instead of what he's been doing? A greater use for his life and these new powers. And it's that core thread that I think when it's used and when it's brought up naturally in his stories with Plas, it tugs on the heart a little bit because it's so genuine and it doesn't require some outside tragedy. It's an internal struggle. And with Plas, those stories resonate the most. You know, when he's not just insanely overpowered and completely wrecking people. When he's a hero simply by choosing to do good over everything else. To understand the frightening power of Plastic Man, though, we have to understand what he's capable of. When you take away or press him into a corner, what happens? And what happens when the one thing keeping him on the good side, that decision to be good, to do good, what if that's taken away? Or what if that's corrupted? That's when everybody needs to be afraid. One of the best stories to do that takes us to a fun little story called Deceased, particularly Deceased Dead Planet. Of all the insane things that Plastic Man has gotten up to and done, not just what he said, but what he's actually done, in the decades since his creation, nothing comes close to what happens in Deceased. For those that don't know, Deceased is basically DC zombies, right? So there's this anti-life equation or some kind of equation that's been transmitted and it infects a bunch of people. It infects the entire universe, basically. And so many of your favorite heroes, many of my favorite heroes and villains have been infected. And over the course of the stories, we see the demise of tons and tons of people. Deaths and otherwise, infections and just heartbreaking stuff. As this team, though, of Detective Chimp, Zatanna, Constantine, Ragman, and Blue Devil, and Swamp Thing, as they all arrive at this bunker, defended by a large moat of blood, a wall of hellfire, and it being a bunker, Zatanna, goes to lift them over it as the moat starts to move. The blood starts to coagulate, and worse, it forms tendrils that shoot up at the team. And they can't really do anything about it because it's all happening so fast. But they realize very quickly that the blood moat is not blood. It's not really a moat. It's a zombified plastic man that is just enormous. He takes out a few members of the team before Swamp Thing can create a protective sphere to shield them all. Z is barely saved by Blue Devil as Plastic Man had started to fill her lungs and others with the tendrils and fill their bodies with it to try to infect them, filling them with himself. So Z uses the fire all around them to burn or melt the giant Plastic Man zombie thing. In another famous story, Injustice Year 4, particularly the annual issue, we find Plastic Man in the Superman-ruled state, asking for his son to be released. Plas even cracks a few jokes about how Superman looks on his throne, which Diana is very quick to say that it's not a throne, when it's very much a throne. Sinestro's evil mustache isn't even safe from Plas's ridicule during all of this. But nonetheless, Superman does not comply with what Plastic Man wants. And Peaceful Barry interrupts the two of them before a full-on brawl could start. As Barry walks Plastic Man out, when they turn a corner, Plastic Man doesn't punch Barry or even keep talking to him. He splits his fingers into these like microscopic tendril things and floods his entire body, sliding it through the Flash's pores, wrapping around and in his internal organs and through his mouth and any hole that he had, not just inside him, but covering him as well. So he effectively turns the fastest man alive, the Scarlet Speedster, into a biological puppet and impersonates every part of him, including his suit. He plays unconscious for Cyborg as the Flash now to get him to show him the schematics of the prison where his son's being kept. All as the Flash, of course, under the guise that Plastic Man is going to break in, so that's why they need to go over these plans. On his way out, he reminisces about the good old days of the JLA. Plas also takes this time to steal a bunch of lantern rings, and we see very briefly Plastic Man's arm from outside or underneath the Flash's body. Anyways, he takes the lantern rings and Mirror Master's belt, and he breaks into the prison to save his kid and successfully orchestrates a big old prison break, impersonating whoever he needs to, and he just goes off. Him and his kid team up, and they're successful. Now, I can't keep this video going without mentioning what might be the most shocking feat Plas has ever done. And it's definitely not what you're probably thinking that it is.
Ideas? Thoughts? Look, I'm flattered, but very married. Nice tattoo, though.
And yes, he's done a lot of impressive things. He's turned into a giant kaiju of plastic skin, mowing down foes with ease. Yes, he's whipped out a ton of weapons made out of his own body, again, and another sort of monster skin thing. And the giant blood zombie thing we just talked about, of course. But the most haunting thing that I've ever read of Plastic Man is just a straight up villain. All during the Flashpoint era of things. So in Flashpoint Legion of Doom, in like the 3 issues that there are of that, Heatwave is locked up, planning a goal to take back what's his and hurt Cyborg for what he's done to him. So part of his grand plan is to recruit Plastic Man to smuggle himself in. And it's not to smuggle Plastic Man into the prison in a truck or a shipping container or even the laundry stuff, like in those classic Prison Break movies or something. He smuggles himself in the body of Cluemaster, of a person. Not too dissimilarly to how he controlled Barry, but this time he's on the inside until he wants to pop out. And I think it kills the guy that he pops out of. It's not clear, but that's a lot of blood and there's a lot of pain and a lot of things happening. Now, it doesn't just stop there either. As Heatwave orchestrates his breakout, Plast turns into a giant ball of barbed wire to hold some guys back. Heatwave bites a guy's nose off right after, and then Plastic Man, which he doesn't like to be called Plastic Man in this universe as this villain because it reminds him of what he's become, I guess. But he breaks into the android known as a Mazo. He breaks into his eye to see who's running it to find the Atom during the prison. The Atom's got this busted up leg, and he doesn't have anything to do with the story, but I just think it's really messed up. So he's missing a leg from the radiation of being the Atom or something. And before the conversation with them gets too deep or anything happens, they squish the Atom's head like a grape. As the escape continues after that, Heatwave gets his gear, and there's a little interaction with Lockup and Sportsmaster. They corner Plastic Man and Mick, Heatwave, and Plast pokes some elastic tendrils through Lockup's eyes. Then he shoves his arm down Sportsmaster's throat and rips his heart out. Like it's nothing. Just casually stretches and reaches down in and just grabs his heart and drops it on the floor like it's nothing. Heatwave then turns against Plastic Man, noting how unpredictable he is, but he's also too predictable. He relies too much on his powers, so he burns Plastic Man there on the spot into a pile of burnt goo. Heatwave, though, ends up getting locked up again, thinking to himself he at least made a mark on Cyborg mentally. He did something, but now he's back in prison, contemplating everything. So he's back where he started, and today he's got a new cellmate. His new cellie tells him how mad he is. Not himself, but referring to somebody else. And before Heatwave can really say anything, his cellmate continues. He didn't tell him how much this next part would hurt. And then it starts just like it began. And out of this new cellmate stretches Heatwave's worst nightmare. Plastic Man back for his own revenge. Plastic Man is someone I would never ever want to double cross like that. Especially if he's doing what he does here. It's just so haunting to see him in action when the tone is a bit darker. When all the interactions in between the comic relief bits are dark and the comic relief bits really aren't there. Plastic Man No More is a story about what happens when Plastic Man's condition takes a turn for the worse. He starts to actually depolymerize and has to bag himself up as he walks around because he's literally falling apart. And I think in that story, we see a truly tragic end to Plastic Man's life, to his career as a hero. And while I don't agree with some of the characterization interpersonally for Plastic Man in that story, I do think it's a really compelling book that is sort of a middle ground for the more silly, jokey side of Plastic Man and even the more calmed down tone of maybe the more famous 2004 book of Plastic Man, which is really good too. Won a bunch of awards and all that, critically acclaimed. Personally, I skew towards more grounded DC stories and art, I guess. But Plastic Man No More is kind of like a nice, perfect middle ground of that. And we like to laugh at the goggles, the silly shapes he makes, and all the classic Golden Age stuff that's kind of on top of him these days. And we politely ignore some of the more pervy elements of his personality.
Ah, you knew? And you didn't even offer me any jerky? Hey, ladies.
Because the alternative is admitting that Plastic Man is essentially an eldritch horror wearing a smile and goggles. He's this guy who can exist as a puddle of blood, a giant puddle of blood moat, or a moat of blood, or frozen in jars for centuries, or a microscopic organism that can get inside your brain and break you. And in all of that, he can keep his consciousness intact. He can reform and be fine no matter what. And even Batman's contingency plan for Plastic Man is just to bide time by freezing him or melting him. Extreme temps are the only options that they have to keep him at bay if Plastic Man decided one day it's not that fun to be a hero anymore. He's the hero that everyone should be afraid of, not because he's evil or anything, but because he's the only one who truly knows how easy it would be to flip the switch, to